Hello, everyone, and welcome to this very exciting webinar sponsored by the Academy of Human Resource Development Leadership Special Interest Group, or SIG. So for those of you who aren't familiar in the academic conference world, we sort of group ourselves in various groups according to our interests. And so this is the Leadership SIG. And I just want to quickly give a brief introduction to the Academy of Human Resource Development and to our speakers today. So my name is Dr. Oliver Crocco. I'm an assistant professor here in the School of Leadership and Human Resource Development at LSU, Louisiana State. And I want to share about Academy of Human Resource Development, which is some of you don't know, the Academy of Human Resource Development used to belong to what is now the Association for Talent Development. And although it was called ASTD then, and what happened basically is that there was a group of scholars who were interested in, rigorous academic research, who did identify, they understood that HRD and leadership were tied to practice, but there was a need for scholarship and a community of scholars. So they sort of branched off from ATD and created the Academy of Human Resource Development, which is now, I think, in its 26th or 27th year. And AHRD was formed to, quote, encourage systematic study of HRD theories, processes, and practices, to disseminate information about HRD, to encourage the application of HRD research findings, and provide opportunities for social interaction among individuals with scholarly and professional interests in HRD from multiple disciplines from around the globe. And I think that really aptly describes our community at AHRD. And the vision of the Academy is to lead the profession through research. And so SIGs are a part of the Academy, and this SIG in particular is the Leadership SIG, which is a network of HRD scholars and practitioners who want to enhance their knowledge, expertise, and research in the area of leadership development. And our guiding purpose is really to facilitate interaction and organize activities that support the development of leadership in individuals, groups, and teams, and organizations in the field of human resource development. So that's where we have arrived with this really excellent webinar today. So I'm going to now introduce our speakers who are going to talk about their webinar, which is titled Conducting Leadership Development in a Virtual World. Our first speaker, well, our speakers are sort of a team, so I won't sort of say our first and our second, but our speakers are Dr. Angie Carter, who received her BA in English from Georgia State University, then embarked on a long career as a manager in the shopping center industry. She received her master's in workforce development education from the University of Arkansas, so we have some representatives here, and an EDD in adult education from the University of Georgia, to culminate in a career change in corporate training and HRD. Dr. Carter is a clinical assistant professor at Clemson University in the Master of Human Resource Development program and an International Coaching Federation ACC Certified Executive Leadership Coach. Dr. Carter teaches, researches, and presents on issues concerning inclusion and equity, human resource and organization development, leadership, and coaching. Dr. Cynthia Sims is an assistant professor and program coordinator of the Master of Human Resource Development program in the Department of Educational and Organizational Leadership and the College of Education at Clemson University, which is in South Carolina, for those of you who don't know. Her research focuses on the ways gender and diversity influence the enactment of leadership in the workplace. She was recognized with an Emerald Literary Award, highly commended 2019 for a research publication. Dr. Sims is the founder, director, and co-lead of Clemson's Gender Equity Leadership Development and Mentoring Program for Faculty, an advanced initiative. She has a bachelor's degree from Lake Forest College, a master's from the College of Education at Harvard University, and a doctorate in organizational leadership from the University of Maryland, Eastern Shore. Prior to her academic career, Dr. Sims was employed with a U.S. Fortune 100 company serving as the Director of Staff Operations, Director of Learning and Performance Improvement, and Director of Human Resources. It is my great privilege to welcome our speakers. I am going to put all of your cameras and microphones on mute for this. And while I am an LSU fan, I do want to share that my tie today has little orange slices in support of my dearest colleagues and friends from Clemson. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ozzy. Thank you, everyone, for coming to this talk today, this webinar. And by the looks of it, I had a slide up earlier that said, what intrigues you about this topic? And, there's a lot of interest around how to conduct leadership development virtually. And we're just really happy that you took time out of your day to join us. So I am Dr. Angie Carter, and I want to first tell you about a few.
Sorry, Angie, I just accidentally muted you when I muted everyone. I didn't think it would apply to co-hosts. I
Okay.
apologize.
All right, very good. So I'm unmuted now. All right, so a few housekeeping items. We're going to be recording the session. For anyone who wants to review it later, we're going to have a Q&A session at the end in case there are questions. And so feel free to ask questions or make comments in the chat. And we're going to have our graduate assistant, Stephen Brown, who is going to be monitoring it to make sure that there's nothing that we missed. We want to make sure that we answer your questions. And we're also, I want to prepare you. We're going to be peppering this presentation with a few polls and questions that you're going to answer in the chat. And also if we were doing this face-to-face, it would be a think, pair, share. We're going to do a think and share for anyone who wants to, share with us with a scenario that we're going to give you at the end. So we're going to make this interactive and kind of model that interactivity that we do in our leadership development programs. And so finally, in case we have any difficulty with technology, I don't think that's going to happen. But if something happens, we'll record a session and send it to you. But again, the way 2020 is going, you never know. So I wanted to kind of put that out to you. So we're going to discuss today three things. The why now, which is why do you need to care about developing leaders in this COVID era? And then how can you make that successful shift from face-to-face to virtual leadership facilitation? We're going to talk about the what. So we have a case study where we're going to give you lessons from a real virtual leadership development program. We're going to talk about the good, the bad, the ugly, and kind of the undecided things that we're still not, we're still unsure about, but we're kind of wading through. We're going to talk about the how. We're going to give you a scenario for you to practice making these course corrections that you have to make in this COVID era, and making that shift to to a virtual platform. And then we're going to really talk about the methods that you can use to create relevant virtual learning experiences to build leadership skills. So when we talk about the why now, the Center for Creative Leadership says that online learning was has been a well-used delivery activity before COVID-19, but it has quickly really become the only way that we develop people in the workplace. I mean, there are other platforms, right? But we use Zoom quite a bit. There are other platforms that we use as well, but Zoom really has become this way that we disseminate information. I am a proponent of online education. And I really do hate the Zoom slander. I think the Zoom is a tool like anything else. And, if you were giving bad meetings, delivering bad meetings or sitting in bad meetings before, it's just a carryover, right? So I don't want you to blame the messenger of Zoom. We were all, in bad meetings before this and unnecessary meetings. So hopefully by modeling, we'll kind of show you some of the ways that you can use Zoom and you can use this virtual platform in order to deliver good information. And so there are reasons why we need to conduct leadership development. So organizations still value the growth that people have and that people can use while they're at home. And people really want to increase their skill set. We're going to talk to you about faculty and about our faculty leadership development program, but this can really go to any context, right? There's a kind of an outpouring and a crying out for people who say, I want to be developed. If I'm home, I might have been downsized. I might need to sharpen my skills. I might need to, figure out what is my next path. And in the middle of all this craziness with COVID, it gives people maybe, an opportunity to take some space to think about what their next steps are, how they can develop as leaders. And, like 50% of all Americans, our faculty are working from home. Ozzie said that he came in the office to make sure his Wi-Fi was good. That's what people do. But, by and large, we're working from home more than we have been before. Online programming is a realistic option. It's just as I said that I don't like when people malign Zoom because it's a tool. Online is a tool as well. You'll hear people say, oh my gosh, I just don't learn well online. I took an online course and it was terrible. Well, I invite you to revisit that, because online learning is different than it used to be, and it can be active and engaging. Participating in a virtual program, we're modeling as we go along. We're modeling these e-learning tips and tricks. I just learned something from Ozzie, figuring out how to turn off the chime, in the Zoom session when people enter. So you can, not only can you learn from the content, but you can learn from how people facilitate things online. And then these people-oriented soft skills. This idea of soft skills really are these essential skills that are as important as the tech skills that people say they want. When people think about, employers think about the kinds of skills that they want from job seekers, people who are new and entering into, an industry, or who are, changing their jobs, they still want these skills, these, what they consider intangible skills of leadership development, of, collaborating, of effectively communicating, and knowing how to lead yourself, knowing, how you operate as a leader, and also how you are as a leader. And so this vital role of human assistance, of being there for people and helping. Edgar Schein has these wonderful books on helping. He has a series of books. I invite you to read them. They are fantastic. And how do we help others throughout COVID and through our leadership is really important. So COVID-19 shouldn't stop our learning. The Center for Creative Leadership says that there are people who might be skeptical of changing to online. But it really is important for leadership continuity. We have to make sure that our leadership pipeline is maintained in organizations. It provides real-time learning. I mean, how many of you have seen good and bad leaders throughout this COVID crisis? How people deal in ambiguity, how they deal in uncertainty is really important to understand. And so it's critical that we understand more about ourselves, that we understand how we operate as leaders during this time, and nothing should really stop that, right? Because it's a case study. You can do a case study on yourself about how you lead and how you lead others. And so with online learning, we have this opportunity to break this, I don't like leadership development, or I don't like leadership development online, or I don't like learning online. We need to rebuild the paradigm of what we think of as leadership development. And so making this successful shift to from face-to-face to virtual leadership development means that you can engage in active learning. It doesn't have to be static. Zoom and other platforms provide us the opportunity to have, breakout sessions where you can do these small group activities. If we were to look at, and I'll describe our leadership development program in just a minute, we had, we obviously had an agenda, but we had, measured times where we wanted to have that, that relational activity. We wanted people to reflect. We wanted people to spend time together, think pair shares, think about something that you're doing, and talk to another person and then share with the group. You can do that in Zoom. I've actually also done a jigsaw. It was pretty complicated, but if you're not familiar with the jigsaw, it's where you get a group of people who learn something about a topic. So in this case, they were learning about adult learning theory, how adults learn. And I had each of those groups learn about a particular theory. Then I broke them out and they had to teach that, broke them out to other groups and they had to teach that to others. And then you come together. And so it's really dynamic when you see a jigsaw in person, but online it is absolutely incredible. It takes a lot of work for the facilitator, as we'll talk about, but there are definite ways that we can be dynamic and promote active learning in virtual settings. We do think that you need some kind of LMS in order to augment your leadership development programming. It's just a way that, as we'll talk about, there's reasons why we promote this, and it's because it's just a way to assist them to have a repository where they can have information and they can check back, at 3 a.m. in their fuzzy slippers when they need to. And they don't have to do it. It's one of the beauties of online learning is that you don't have to do things synchronously. You can build teams, you can build trust in online settings. And as I mentioned before, you can really hold space for reflection, much like you would do in face-to-face settings. And so I want to talk about the lessons that we learned from our virtual leadership development program that switched midstream from fully face-to-face to fully online. And then we'll talk a little bit about our lessons learned from that. So our program is, this year, so we have 22 participants. We call the program Trailblazers, and it is a gender equity leadership development program. And so what we mean by that, this is coming out of an advanced grant and from NSF, from National Science Foundation, and it was a part of institutional change, a large institutional change that grant. And Trailblazers comes from that, and it comes from our identification that women leaders, particularly in academia and in science and STEM fields, did not have the pipeline. There's a broken pipeline for them. There was not a mechanism for them to understand their leadership and to be mentored. And so that's where that's really the basis of our program. I do think that there's someone, if one of you can see if there's someone who would need to be
Angie, I can just mute all and then you can unmute yourself.
Okay, let's do that. Okay. All right, very good. Thank you for that. So our program was going, full steam ahead last year, like a lot of things, and then COVID hit. And so we were, we had the face-to-face sessions. It's a 9-month program where we match mentors with with mentees. And we have, as you see on the screen, we have, we've made a commitment to have, more female faculty because that's really the basis of our program. But there's a lot of scholarship that says you can't just have a leadership development program for women, that you have to also, if you're going to do institutional change and try to change behaviors of implicit bias and things of that nature, you also have to train the men. But we did make the commitment that we would have more female faculty than male faculty to give them the opportunity to understand more about their leadership. And then, as you see, we have we actually have more mentors than mentees this year, which hadn't been the case before. But the great thing is that through the Trailblazers Leadership Development Program, we were able to kind of build this cadre of mentors. So not only did they go through the leadership development program, but they also became mentors at the end, and then we trained them how to do so. And we're really proud of our tradition that we have a lot of, I don't have the stat up here, but we've had quite a few women who have gone on, and men who have gone on from this program and gotten promotions and gone into administration and really used their knowledge about leadership in new ways. So our program calendar, I started talking about this earlier, that it's a 9-month program. We start in September. We start with this really great leader gender bias case study where it's a blind study. We split the room and we split them into groups now, and we have one of them, we have them identify, the leadership abilities of the person that they're seeing on screen. And what they don't realize is that it's either a male or a female, and we kind of watch how they use language and really understand what leadership is as a man and as a male and as a female. And then we start really early on with mentoring training. We want to train our mentees in what is how are you going to be augmented in your leadership development journey through a mentor. We want to understand, we don't want to take anything for granted and have them not be aware of what mentoring is. So we define it, we train them, we tell them these are the expectations of mentees. Here's what you can expect out of a mentor. And then in October, we start with one of our leadership development theories. So we're theory-based, but we don't believe, neither one of us believe that you enact any particular theory all the time. So we go through a number of different leadership theories and we teach them, and then we have activities that are related to those. And so we also do mentor matching. So we have a very elaborate system of making sure that the mentors and the mentees are matched well. It's one of the things that the literature really speaks to. If your mentor and your mentee are not matched well, then it's really difficult to continue in that relationship. And then we intro leadership projects. So after the first year, we decided that we needed the Trailblazers to enact leadership, to really demonstrate, this institutional change idea that I talked about earlier, that they needed to put that in practice. And so we have a number of leadership projects that they engage in that really try to move the needle on changing things for women at Clemson University. And so we talk in November about emotional intelligence. We do a transformational leadership 360. And we also, again, really hone in on those mentoring and leadership projects. We talk in December about implicit bias. We introduce servant leadership. Again, we're doing our mentoring and leadership projects. In January, we usually have a speaker come in who talks about gender equity leadership. How do you enact this? What does it look like for women and men who are enacting gender equity? And then we check in with our mentors. Another thing that we found beyond training the mentors and the mentees, we check in on those types of assignments and make sure that things are going well, because we don't want, at the end for someone to say, oh, I didn't meet with my mentor, since October. Well, we want to make sure that we are on top of that conversation. In February, we talk about leading and managing change. We have a facilitated panel. again, our mentoring and leadership projects, you can see that we have these 3 areas that we really hone in on. We talk about championing family-friendly policies and things like work-life balance, which I don't think is a thing. I think it's more of a, do the best you can do. I don't believe in balance because something is inevitably out of balance. But we talk about equitable workloads, and again, our mentoring and leadership projects. We're talking about social justice leadership in April. We talk about negotiation, conflict management. We talk about implicit bias, if that wasn't mentioned as well. And in May, we have a program finale where we do leadership project report outs. And so this year, we have had to, kind of reframe and kind of change how we do things quite a bit. And I'll actually turn this over to Dr. Sims, who will talk about kind of the lessons learned. I wanted to kind of ground you in what we do for our leadership development program and mentoring. And then she's going to talk about, what did we learn from it and how did we change, due to COVID. You're muted. Let's see.
You're still
Okay.
muted. Oh, there you go.
Okay,
Yeah, you should have
I've got it. All right. Well, welcome everyone, and thank you so much. It's a pleasure being here. So let's talk about sort of the lessons learned. So we are virtual instructors, and so we try to develop expertise in that. And so sort of the research points to less is more, especially in an online environment. So we went from a 4.5-hour program down to a 3-hour virtual program. So one of the biggest things that you're going to have to do is be judicious, so we're sort of things that we aren't able to do, we have to figure out a different way of doing it, as well as just really sometimes make the hard decisions of not doing some things. So in terms of how to do things, we really have to use sort of that chunking that you see in most virtual programs. So there's some pre-work associated with it. Then you have what's going to occur during the session, and then follow up sort of those post-session activities. So, and we're going to talk about that. Some of the other things that we've done from a leadership project, as Angie was going through it, you saw that we have pretty much a leadership project, a mentoring project, and a leadership curriculum. And my first year, I did all of that. I recommend it. Don't ever do that. I actually recruited Angie from an AHRD conference, so I was glad to have a partner in crime once we had an opening. And then we've actually added an alumni who's a full professor who actually works with us on the leadership. So dividing and conquer has really allowed us to focus and do a better job. Next. Okay, so what was some of the good, the bad, and the ugly? So let's start with the good. And so we're going to have 3 examples for you. So one is, as Angie mentioned, we start off with a leader gender bias case study. Now, they don't know it's a bias case study. They just think of it as a leadership project. And so what we do is we split the pre-read so that they do that in advance. They have activities that they need to complete. They have to do a rating. Then Stephen helps compile that information, and then we use it in the virtual Zoom session. So in that session, we debrief the pre-assignment, then we put them into breakout groups to discuss it. We use a collaboration forum. For us, it's Google Docs, so they can then report back out and present what their findings were as a group. And then post sessions, we introduce what the post sessions are going to be. We'll have follow-up readings. We'll conduct an online forum to continue the discussion. And then they want us to send reminders out about announcements and due dates. Now, I know you all would think that faculty would be on top of their assignments, but you know, the old adage, the cobbler's children have no shoes. You know, the faculty, they do things at the 12th hour like everybody else. So assignments are important. So the other thing that we're doing is, Angie talked about, was the leadership project selection. So when we did that, so how do you get people to know which projects to actually share, to work on? So Stephen, if you wouldn't mind putting in the chat the titles of our leadership projects. So there are some topics that come up perennially in faculty ratings from students has come up every year as a project. And there's research that shows that students do not rate women and minorities at the same way that they rate others from the majority culture, white males. And so that's one that's come up every year. So they're trying to work on that one as a change project. And we have other initiatives. So we have policy issues. So all that to say, sorry, let me go back. I could talk about this a lot. So pre-session. So what we did is we prepared a collaboration document, again, a Google Doc. And we essentially listed the titles of the projects. So we're carrying over projects from last year as well as initiatives. And we asked people to indicate, you know, put their name down. So put up a table, you know, what's their first, second, and third, and fourth choice. And we can literally see this being completed live. And then in the session, we invited virtual guests to talk about each one of these leadership projects. And then you can literally see real time people going in and changing their rankings. And then based on those rankings, we then put people into a discussion group. We broke them out into groups, and then we placed the moderator for that topic so that they could learn more. And then post-session, what we do is we provide them the opportunity to explore. So we're putting them back into a group based upon their interests, or better yet, we're establishing the groups, and then they can place themselves in that group, and then we will upload for that group all of the materials associated with that. So that was one that worked well virtually. And then we'll go on to the third one, which is the mentor match. So how do you do speed mentoring, sort of matching virtually? So normally what we would do is, in a real life situation, we would have some people stay at the table, and then we'd have other people rotate so that everyone could get to meet everyone else. So we want the mentors to meet the mentees. So, and we asked them to prepare a 1-minute elevator pitch. So for those of you who don't know what that is, we could talk about that, but it's essentially, who are you? What do you want to get? So that people can get a sense of, you know, who might be a good match for them. And so this time what we had them do is we prepared an example of that pitch and put it up, and then we asked them, and we gave them a deadline to actually do it, and then they uploaded their pitches. And so those are both the mentors and the mentees. And then we'll, in the session, we will conduct, so that's the one coming up, we're going to have, we've already conducted mentee training. So we spend time just walking them through, what does mentoring look like. Feedback that we've gotten from our sessions pretty much indicate that, you know, people know mentoring because that's what they've done before, you know, but we give them a lot of sort of the more technical aspects, so they know the different types of mentoring, and they know exactly what we're expecting them to do in these sessions. Then we use a Google form to have them describe themselves. So they have their elevator pitch, and then we essentially build out this online chapter where, think of it as a page of profiles. And then people can go through and look at those profiles, and then we use Qualtrics, and we have this drop down of who would you like to select as a mentor, and they can put in their top 3 choices, and we use that to make the match. And then post-session, which is what we'll be doing next, we will meet and then we will match them based upon their preferences. And then we'll send out an email letting them know who they're matched. And then we also do Zoom training for the mentors, and we'll post handouts on our learning management system. So those are some of the things that we do. So that's the good. So what's the bad? So virtual training is planning, planning, and more planning. So it's not like face-to-face where you show up and everything's conducted there. You really have to set things up. So that's why we do the chunking. That's why we meet. We need to make sure that we know who's doing what. We have somebody there to facilitate. So all of those things really make a big difference. Use the learning management system to make assignments. If we found that has been something that our participants have responded to. People like structure. So tell them what it is that you're going to do and then do what you say. And that's the same with your agendas. And time management becomes really critical in those sessions. So if you can have somebody there who can be a time tracker, that's great. Make sure you check the technology so that it's working appropriately. Zoom giveth and taketh away, so in terms of redundancies, how people work together, all of those things in terms of Zoom, in terms of, bandwidth and speaking rates, you always have to have alternatives. Having someone there to facilitate breakout groups and queries. And then last but not least, we really want to focus on how do you build community. I mean, these individuals don't necessarily know each other. So, you want to be personal. You want to make sure that you have time to connect with them. They have time to connect with each other. We always have different breakout sessions or icebreakers so that people can start to interact with one another. We have people have introductory profiles. So we want to continue to build that community, and online groups is the way to do that. So what could be improved? Now, I'm sure we all know this. What is Murphy's Law? What can go wrong will. Okay, so technology, redundancy, redundancy, redundancy. I've had all of this happen to me while I've been teaching. I've had my internet go out, I've had my computer blow up, and I've had my camera go off, so I've had to switch to literally an online telephone from a video chat. I have 3 computers always. I have internet, so if my house internet goes out, my phone internet, make sure that we would have people from our help community at the beginning, making sure everybody could log in, make sure at the beginning that if people who aren't necessarily technologically adept or adroit, that you have tech there, right there, and you provide people with guidelines. Some things are good practices in online, and then other things is like, just say no to that. So those are things that you want to do. Plan for the unexpected. And then the last thing I'll talk about is privacy. One of the big challenges I find is that, when you're in a classroom setting and someone wants to come up to you and ask you a question, they can do that one-on-one without having everybody listen. You have to actually sort of build and ask for that in terms of a session. So everything could be broadcast publicly. So try and find opportunities so that people can really reach out to you. So for example, we're establishing one-on-one sessions. We're also establishing office hours so people can just check in without necessarily having to be in a big group. And we're trying to get all of that done within that 3-hour period. All right, so here's your term. I'm looking at the time, so we're good. So try your hand at developing a virtual leadership development session. So we're going to ask you to play a game with us. What would you do? So what methods can you use to create relevant virtual learning experiences to build leadership skills? So we've talked about, putting things on assignments, chunking them pre-session, during session, post-sessions. We've talked about Google Docs, Google Forms, assignments, discussion forums, live chat. So all right, so in a leadership development program, so this is the scenario, and then you can respond in chat. Suddenly, the last 2 sessions had to go online. The leadership session report out was the culminating activity. So this is share with us what you did all semester, the last academic year. So think and share. How would you convert the program to a virtual format using the tools that you have at your disposal? Thoughts? You could put some of that in chat. So Dee Dee says, how are boundaries created and maintained by mentors and mentees when communication is attempted outside of office hours? Interesting. We'll get back to you on that. That's between them and the mentors. So some of the requests are moving interactive, doing fishbowls. Love the fishbowls idea. Interactive meetings in Microsoft Teams, sharing documents, fishbowl activity and breakouts, Zoom and PowerPoints, those are always good ones. Do some video recordings, which we could have them do video recordings, which we could watch as pre-work. Now that's an interesting idea. Then the live sessions could be a Q&A or discussion session about application and content. Yes, and that's predicated that they read the materials in advance. Remember that. Use Jamboard in Google for brainstorming activities like that. Zoom breakout groups, Padlet for brainstorming and sharing. Wonderful. Team rooms. I would give time for the group to get a little familiar with one another. I would use chats and videos with the information important and presentation style videos and PowerPoint. And we'll just do a few more. Let's see, we've got Google groups, topic specific Facebook groups. We haven't done that one yet, so that would be interesting. Different tools like Prezi, Flipgrid, Google Suite. All right. So thank you for that. So let's go on to our next one. I wasn't able to get to all of them, but thank you so much for sharing. All right, so we're going to change a little bit. Instead of talking about leadership development program, we're going to talk about e-mentoring. And I think that's a question that came up. So this is another scenario, and you can answer in chat. So we're going to cue this up. So what technology do you have that you could use to match mentors and mentees? How would you develop and deliver mentor and mentee training? What content would you offer pre-sync, sync, and post-sync? And how will you remain flexible to address the inevitable changes in calendars and times? So just put answers in your chat. So what are some takeaways you will implement in your own virtual leadership development program? Looking forward to your responses. Pre-session, Google Docs, then a Q&A, live session using Team. Government employees use Saba. Haley, Google Docs. These are going fast. Google Docs. Blackboard discussion groups with mandatory replies. I would create a survey to get an idea of what is necessary, create an event, learn more about building community with an online environment, use Mentor Marketplace program with ease so they can sign up as a mentor. Nice to know. Google Doc and Blackboard discussion groups. Leverage asynchronous learning to maximize synchronous activities. Use a strength assessments. Emails, agendas. All right. Thank you, one and all. Those are great suggestions. As I said, one of the great things about virtual is it's a sharing experience. And so you share some things that we hadn't thought about. Going to open it up. So what questions do you have?
Were there questions, Stephen, that we didn't get to that I couldn't see some of those questions? So if you have a question that.
Yeah, one of the questions I saw that I don't think was answered was how are boundaries created and maintained? Oh, I'm sorry. Is there any checkpoint during the mentoring relationship to evaluate if the matching has served its purpose?
Yes. So early on, so when I had the listing of what we did every month, in January, we usually have a checkpoint to make sure that, you know, if there's any additional training, we get all the mentors together to kind of, you know, crowdsource how are their mentoring, how's their mentoring going. One thing I didn't mention is that we invite our mentors also into our LMS. So the mentors, we thought it was important for the mentors to see the types of topics that the mentees were going through in their leadership development journey every month. And so we have this, at least last year, we had a executive summary that they could read, and then they could take that into their mentoring sessions. And then also, I think Cynthia mentioned that we've split the leadership projects, which we use an action learning methodology, by the way, and the mentoring, and then the curriculum of leadership development into 3, and each of us lead those. So this year is the first time that we've split the leadership projects out. Before, Karen did that for us. This is the first time that I am taking the lead on mentoring. So every month, so one of the first things that I'm going to do is I'm going to have the mentors and the mentees do a contract. That's not something that we've done before. It'll be a loose contract. They can renegotiate the terms. But I really feel it's important for them to kind of put down on paper what they want to accomplish out of this mentoring relationship. And then I am going to have, you know, many conversations with them so that hopefully we'll make sure that that relationship is solidified. We can identify any issues really early on as well through that oversight.
Angie, there's a question on mentoring and how did you address e-mentoring or e-leadership in the program? And then, so was everyone mentored on the same topics each month, or did you leave it up to participants to determine what they needed mentoring on? So Peter's asking about how did you address e-mentoring or e-leadership, I'm assuming specifically in this program. And Kim is asking, so was everyone mentored on the same topic?
Okay, so e-mentoring is a work in progress. We'll let you know next year. We might want to do a follow-up. We could do a follow-up next year on just the e-mentoring program and kind of lessons learned from there. So the elements that, you know, the elements that we anticipate that we'll have to address is making sure that, you know, it's very similar to making sure that the mentor and mentee, you know, put time on their calendar during the session, that they are being intentional about the days and that they want to meet. We suggest and have an expectation around them meeting at least 6 times during that 9 months. and meet once a month. Pre-COVID, it was, we suggest you meet formally once a month and then have these kind of bump into each other, at different events, or we gave space also for the mentors to come into our rooms, before the sessions or any of the sessions that we did for the Trailblazers. And we anticipate that we may need to do that as well. The mentors are always welcome into our sessions. It just helps with that engagement if you see your mentor more often, and you can have these little informal conversations as well. So we're gonna have to think through some of these other things that where, in a virtual space that we did, face to face. So our advance grant afforded some of these, meetings where, everyone who was interested in institutional change or the advance grant could come together, maybe an after hours event or something like that. We're going to have to figure out how to mimic that and how to have these little bump-ins that they can engage with their mentor and get to know them a little bit more deeply rather than just 6 formal sessions. E-leadership is what you're seeing as what we presented. It was formally, all face-to-face. We've had to shorten our program and bring it completely online. We do synchronous and asynchronous. So, our synchronous are once a month on Fridays for 3 hours. And the asynchronous is where you could do it in your fuzzy slippers. You can see the material that we post. Either we have an activity before or an activity, and then we have the activity, and then we'll post the activities that they need to complete afterwards. We also put all of our, if we have any kind of assessments or anything like that we need, our 360, everything goes through that online platform. And then what was the last question was?
I think you addressed it. Is everyone mentored the same on each topic every month?
Yeah, no, they're not. We actually leave that up to the mentor and mentee pair. So when Cynthia mentioned that we have a form that they fill out, they do their elevator pitch, and then we have the mentors and the mentees say, here's what we go on a mutuality basis, right? A mutual mentoring. So we don't feel that it has to be hierarchical, that there has to be this, older, wiser mentor that gives you the ropes, right? Or tells you about the experience they went through. Certainly that's part of it. But mutual mentoring really, the basis of it is that the mentee and the mentor bring something each to the table. And that is a more fulfilling relationship than just, here's what I did and you should do the same thing, because we all know that everyone is different. And we ascribe to that. So everyone in the mentor matching is different. I, as someone, I might have some different needs than someone else. I might look towards, what is my next step in my academic journey? Someone else might look to, I'm already a full professor. I want to know how I can engage my passions, or how do I help the university, or how do I, so different people are in different stages. And we are intentional about our mentor matching in that we use those forms for the mentor and the mentee to make sure that that they're getting what they want out of that relationship. And then we help them to foster that and to figure out what are those things that are really meaningful for us to talk about. How would this be helpful for us in this session?
Okay. One person has a comment, and in terms of it's Heather Esposito. I don't have a question, but I have a suggestion on ways to build community that we discovered through our move to virtual.
Hi, we recently took a coach training program that we use for our leaders into the virtual world. And we are bringing together participants from all over the world. So employees who live in China, India, the UK, Brazil, Mexico, the US. And we were looking for ways, because normally in the face-to-face environment, you have lots of time for these offhanded conversations where you start to discover commonalities. So one of the things that we did to just try and get them to become familiar with one another, because in a coaching workshop, there's so many intimate, potentially discussions that are happening where you're working through issues with someone. We created a SharePoint site with bios and headshots. And some of it was like, what are your hobbies and interests outside? Why did you apply to be part of the program? And their picture. And then we use Microsoft Teams. We're a Microsoft organization. So we put out question prompts within their cohort groups and said, go into the bios, get to know your cohort members, and connect with someone who has something in common with you. But do it, I don't know what your LMS is, but we were able to do it in more of like kind of a Facebook posty kind of chat type environment. So if I said to you, Angie, oh my gosh, you love Peloton, I love Peloton, and then other people who may have had an interest but hadn't read the bios yet got in on those conversations. And it was really cool to watch. The plant people found their people, and the Peloton people found their group, and the music found their people, the foodies, the readers. And all of a sudden these communities were just sharing information about favorite books, favorite dishes. So when they came to their first virtual class, they already had something in common with one another. And we've even continued to do that with the kind of the flipped classroom pre-work concept. So whatever the pre-work is, we just put a question out there. What was something new or surprising you learned? And so they're already engaging on the topic before we get them back into the live practice and application sessions. We didn't know if it would work, but it's worked better than we anticipated. And there's already friendships that are forming with people that they never would have met in the organization. So I don't know if that's helpful to others, but it was a serendipitous surprise for us about how much that helped just get commonality going.
Yeah, I think that no, that's really helpful, and that's really neat to hear that you've been able to engage that way. And I think one of the takeaways for me is that we have to use, Cynthia and I are both online, 100% online professors, and we have to use those same types of engagement tactics that we use in the classroom, right? So we have to do the icebreakers. We have to, figure out how to build community. And those are, we did a Where I'm From poem. I don't know if you all are familiar with this. It's a great way. I do it in my classes or for orientation. It's a poem that someone wrote about the types of things, that make them who they are. And you can, you fill in the blanks for your own poem. So, we have all these STEM folks who are like, oh my God, I have to write a poem. But they end up loving it, and they're like, oh my gosh, I spiraled and I spent so much time on this. But when you read the other ones, it's one of those little things about, where I came from. I came from the Midwest, right? And so it's these little engagement points. If you can, think about how to engage people and how to build that community is really important. So thank you, Heather. I appreciate that. It's a great comment. So it is 12:59. So if you have any other questions or feel free to reach out to us. Here's our information. I hope you learned something from the session. As we mentioned, we're still learning about some of this, right? We're still learning about the e-mentoring, and I am excited to kind of come back and report that. So stay tuned for some of our lessons learned as we move more into this virtual leadership development kind of arena and world. So thank you so much for coming today, and thank you for your attention. And like I said, let us know if you have any further questions. Here's our contact information.
Thank you very much, Dr. Carter and Dr. Sims. And thanks for everyone for attending. I will make the recording available and send it out to the list of registrants. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. And, you know, I should say go Tigers, but because I think that would apply to both of us. So go Tigers. That's right. So take care, everyone. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.